Hello everyone, Minute Plus Meditation, Friday, January the 21st, the Feast of Saint Agnes. So in the first reading from 1 Samuel, then David went and stealthily cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. Afterward David was stricken to the heart because he had cut off a corner of Saul's cloak. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to raise my hand against him, for he is the Lord's anointed." So David scolded his men severely and did not permit them to attack Saul. So there's something both, I think, clearly noble, and also, this is my personal opinion, self-serving about this. David knows he's the anointed, he's the chosen. He's the one who's going to succeed Saul. He knows this. Back in the day, people would rise up against kings and, slaughter them, and then they would take over, and somebody would slaughter them, and they would take over, and somebody would slaughter them, and they would take over. Not so in the line of David. It may have happened later on. I can't remember from memory right now. But David is doing two things at once. Number one, he knows he's going to be king in God's time, and he's not rushing that point. He's not attacking Saul, he's fleeing from Saul. And what he's aware of is that God is going to ultimately take care of this. God is going to see through the unfolding of natural circumstances that Saul will die in battle. So he is treating the kingship with great reverence, respect, rather than topple the dynasty, well, it's not a dynasty yet, it never will be, but topple the kingship through his own means. And he gets this. So that's because Saul was God's election. Saul was God's choice. Now David is God's choice. So it would be, first of all, disobeying the Lord to kill Saul, to murder Saul. It will happen in battle, but not by David's hand. David refuses to kill him. Saul eventually recognizes this in this passage. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, by doing this, don't you think that he's sending a message to everybody else when he's king? The Lord's anointed is sacred. Even though he's a sinful man like Saul, he's not to be murdered, on the throne and taken over, you have a takeover. So it is, I think, primarily out of reverence for God, but there's probably something there he's thinking about his own self as well. And that's important for you and me, that we respect, for example, someone like the Pope, who is God's chosen. Some people like this Pope, some people like that Pope, some people don't like this Pope, some people don't like that Pope, but the Pope is God's chosen. He's permitted him at least to sit on the chair of Peter. And therefore we must love the Pope, will his good, pray for him, and not speak badly of him, not try to kill him, as it were, through dragging his name through the mud, but to build him up, to even offer sacrifices and mortifications for him. Okay, so now to the gospel. So Jesus goes to the mountains in the Gospel of Mark. And he prayed all night, and he appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, and he sent them out to proclaim the message and to have authority to cast out demons. So Jesus went up to the mountains and called to him those whom he wanted. Well, we know from the other Gospels that he actually spent all night in prayer. So Jesus always prayed, but he prayed extra when he was going to make big decisions. And this is one of his biggest ones, was when he would choose the 12, they would be the pillars of the church. And you see, he chooses Judas. Many years ago, there was a movie made, can't remember, I think it was Jesus of Nazareth. I think that's what it was, Zeffirelli. And this idea that Judas comes to Jesus and he becomes one of his disciples. No. Judas was chosen by Jesus to be a great saint, and he could have been a great saint. He could have been maybe the greatest of them all, because he committed, along with Peter, the biggest sin of them all. But, we know that what Judas ultimately chose to do. But he didn't have to commit suicide. In his case, he could have repented. Just like Peter repented, he also committed a great sin. So you and I, we need to pray regularly, but even more so when we have to make big decisions. This is so important for us. And unfortunately, we often forget. It goes right out of our mind. We just don't consider it. Making time to pray for big decisions in our life. It could be buying a house, could be where the kids go to school. It could be for students with school to go to and all this kind of stuff. So remember how important it is. Jesus sets an example for you and for me to always be faithful in prayer, but to be even more intentional, to make extra time to pray when it comes to big decisions, and always desiring, of course, to do the Father's will. God bless you.